Our first presentation after the break is Radhika and Shivangi. So, welcome.
Thank you. Good morning. My name is Radhika.
Hello, I'm Shivangi.
So when we started this exercise, started analyzing, looking into the galaxy and into the master plan, and one thing that both of us strongly felt, and that's how we also came together, working together, is this sense of orienting ourselves to give a directionality. Because if you look at the cover of the master plan, as the plan is dynamic, it's very difficult to figure out where the north is. And actually, if you look at this, the axis, yeah. So that's the north-south axis of the Matra Mandir. And for the initial few exploration, it was almost like, oh, the north is actually the park and not the industrial zone. But then slowly we got this confirmation that no, the north is actually up here towards the industrial zone. So yeah, so I think that's one of the things that we learn, and we would strongly also put forward that in the future master plans and coming studies, we kind of orient ourselves, not because that's kind of an international practice to have that, and it's easy to ground ourselves as well.
And also, like Radhika mentioned, this also came from the space where we both were working differently and trying to figure out how the space of the form of the galaxy, which is circular, which is dynamic, can still give us some sense of groundedness. So when we work with this idea of directionality and the grounding, we really felt the orientation being the first inquiry that we want to make, and that is what also led us to the next steps of discovering what different things have been said about the different directions and the model itself.
So we started going back to the base and studying what the vision from the mother and how Roger took it. So this was the first sketch, and I think the initial idea was to have the industrial zone towards the east, towards the sea, with 4 industrial zones, and a lot of those ideas. But then when Roger came back in 1965 with his first report after the many studies, he gave some pointers, and one of the first one was to relocate the zones for accessibility and possibilities of extension. So that's how the industrial zone became north, and Mother has given the directional symbolism and also shape symbolism to these zones. So the north, we have a Mahakali industrial zone, which has square, and the color is 7 colors of rainbow, which represents 7 represents realization. Then on the east is the cultural zone. So this got swapped, the international and cultural. So on the east is the cultural zone, and the shape is circle, which means integral power. With the color pale orange. Then on the south residential zone, the shape given was hexagon, which signifies perfect creation. Then on the west is the international zone Mahasaraswati, triangle representing wisdom. So this really kind of gave us an inspiration, because what is the essence of all of these quality, and how do we bring that to our zones? And both of us, we are also Vastu Shastra students, so we also kind of try to draw parallels between them. And then it was a very interesting exercise. And then we saw that if we look at the north, it says it signifies prosperity. When we go northeast, nurturance, east, life energy, southeast, spiritual energies. On the south is more spiritual growth. Southwest signifies wisdom. West is physical growth and expansion, where there is the international zone. Then on the northwest is intellectual growth and creativity. And then also other thing which also came up in one of the expert presentations about these concentric rings in a typical traditional town planning, where the center is kind of a very potent, it holds a very potent energy, and often it is left for sacred precincts or sacred groves. And then as we move along, and as we go towards the outside, there are zones. So after the center, there is the more public services, more administrative services, and then comes the habitation, and then comes the outside relationships.
So yeah, I mean, we tried to see also that when we study the different significance and the representation that was given by the mother, and what the cosmology in the Vastu Shastra says, we really felt that there are a lot of parallels to be drawn between the two, and also our understanding, like, you know, like Radhika mentioned, the center being the potent energy and the center being free in some way. We really see that already in Auroville, that the center is not a built mass, the center is the banyan tree, which is the free center, and that gave us another inspiration to really look at the cosmology, and then see how the different what we call here the padas, the different zones are there. And it's interesting to see how the crown that we are now exploring is into the Devika Pada, which, like Radhika mentioned, is about the public services and the administration that's there, after which comes the Manushya Pada, where the residences and where the habitation happens. So it's really that transition between the center, which is dedicated to the divine energy, and then the space which is for the habitation, and the space between the two is really that transition that we are now exploring.
And then when we started looking at the kind of the existing layers, we are thinking of the physical space, and at the same time us occupying our spaces. We as transitional beings, what was kind of there before, where we are at, and what this future aspiring galaxy towards which we are moving. So we are also looking at how to manifest this cosmic city with material awareness of the present context. So there are some layers like the archaeological site, there is the Kali temple, there is also another archaeological findings which were done in this zone, and then there is the timeless banyan, which is giving us a kind of a base, and then we are here with all of our current developments, and then we have our aspirations. We are also looking at how we transition between these time zones. How do we facilitate this transition between the time zones?
I mean, also that these kind of, like Radhika mentioned, the idea is to look into the physical space, at the same time what we call the Kala Purusha, the space which comes through us through time. So we are exploring into that, and we thought that again another important aspect to look at is the rituals, because the rituals are integral part of the Vastu, and they also create spaces which are adaptive eventually. There are shift in spaces according to the seasons, according to the influence of the planets, and we thought it's an important inquiry to look into, how do we transition between what has been there, what is grounding us, what is currently here, and what do we aspire to. And here we see some pictures of the Kali temple. So we did that visit, and we really felt it's a very important inspiration we have, very close to the crown, within the 100 meter of the crown. And if you see the image, like the most on the right, that's an image of a little tree in the Kali temple, where the tree has been given some space to really grow even in middle of the built structure. So there is a little cutout that's there for the tree to grow. So, but that's the built space of the temple. Then next picture, which is not so clear, but if you see on the left of the picture, there is a water body that's there. So it's a water catchment which has been not exactly given a clear geometric form, but when we go there, we really see like it's one of those squarish water bodies that could be converted into some kind of a kund eventually. And then the third is what is there on the other side of the temple where it is surrounded by trees around. So actually if we see the back side of this image is where the road that we all access right now to Pony Farm is. So the temple is very, very close to that road, but we don't see it also because there is this whole idea of sacred groves around the temple. So what we felt was the temple complex itself, which is nearby the crown there, is already an inspiration with it being a complex where there is a built space. There is also the incorporation of the water body that's there and the sacred groves, the trees that are around. So we thought that acknowledgement of this is very important here.
So when we started looking at all this, and we automatically felt called towards focusing on industrial zone, looking at, especially now that we're looking at development and moving towards a self-supporting community, North also representing prosperity. We thought it's actually, it would be very interesting to strengthen our industrial zone. And this is also a zone mentioned by Nicole. It's an inward-looking zone. When we had the talk from Nicole, it's really the zone where we are looking inward, we are at service. So yeah, and also at a very principal level, this matter, spirit evolution can start manifesting at this.
So when we thought about looking in detail at the industrial zone, we also thought that while we look at the zone by itself, it's also important to see how it connects with the zones on the other sides. And it was interesting to see how many other dream weaving architects resonated with it when we presented it last time, of how the zones could actually start merging in some way. So this is a little diagram down there which shows that there are different activities happening in the industrial zone, but there are also some spillover of some activities from the cultural zone and from the international zone that is happening onto the crown. So it really shows the coming together of the crown for the different zones. So for the activities, we thought that as we move from the international zone, it could really have some spaces of the institutional memory. It could have some exhibition spaces which is coming from the exchanges that happens through the international zone, which are reflected onto the industrial zone. Then the spaces where people working in the industrial zone can come together. They come together to have tea. There are lounge spaces like that. There are co-working spaces. There are some cafes which are maybe not so formal, yet more of the community spaces that are there. Then we just got a picture of something saying community clothing, but the idea is that there is some kind of shopping that happens within the industrial zone that's more for the people who are working there and more for the interaction that could happen within the zone. Then facilities like having laundry during the day there. And then as we move towards the cultural zone, it could be more of the cultural zone spillover that could start happening onto the crown of the industrial zone. So that could mean some kind of market, some kind of exchange through the vocational trainings, exchanging of skills and things like that. And this is the exploration we had. And then we thought that this is all the activities about the day. How about the night? We can have something more at the night where we are kind of integrating further the cultural zone and international zone into the industrial zone, because we do have the infrastructure. And in the night, when a zone which is more about the service and more about work might become suddenly empty, and to add to the security layer of the zone, it would be interesting to add more elements from the cultural zone spill out. So for example, there is a concert in the cultural zone, but the night market and the food stall after, or some kind of gathering after, happens into the industrial zone. So if you see, the little sketch that was there before has now slightly changed with more of the merging of the activities from the cultural zone and also from the international zone. So we thought that there could be a full spectrum of activities like the stargazing sessions, some camping sites, some kind of bonfires, some kind of sacred circles, some kind of working together or sharing together, some kind of night walks or night markets. So we really thought that that kind of presence into the industrial zone in the night and be able to use the infrastructure that we have would be important to see.
Yeah, another thing was also that so it's in a way not just industrial zone. We also felt that this should kind of happen in the other zones as well, to to make the zone integral in itself so that all the zones work together as a city. So there are these connections. So some parts of some functions, some activities from other zones also happen in the adjacent zones, so that it's kind of integral in itself, and that's how the whole thing can work well together.
Yeah, and then as we dive deeper into the industrial zone, we thought it's also important to start very broadly classifying what kind of activities in the industrial zone happens towards the center and what happens towards the outside. So as we're leading towards the center, more towards the peace area, more quieter activities like the artistic layers, co-working spaces, things like that we thought could be more onto the inside of the industrial zone, while on the outside, it could be more of the production units, the manufacturing activities. And it was rightly mentioned, also pointed out by David last time, that it's interesting that because the line of forces are also planned somehow in this way, the higher part of the line of forces are more towards the center, so they could be more for the activities that require less of movement of the trucks or less of movement of the other vehicular movement that is there, and the manufacturing really happens more towards the end of the line of forces, where the heights of the buildings are lower, and that way it's more connected to the ground there. And then we talk about the industrial zone. The very important layer to look at would be mobility. So like already Radhika has acknowledged that, thanks to Fabian, that we could really use that as a base to start working on it. So this is really a sketch on top of Fabian's diagram, where we try to understand what are the different connections that we have. So you see the orange spaces are the different villages. We have Kulapalam down there, we have Bomarpalam, Kalapet, the three villages on the top, Sanjeevi Nagar, Allan Kupam and Kotakarai, and then the Koot Road. So we, and the Edinchavi, of course. So we see that there are these different villages from, and currently we have a huge part of our working people or working population, which we also include in a part of our population. So we can kind of also say that we are not 3,500, we are really many more than that, because we have that working population coming together. So we see that those people are coming from these different zones, and just from the same diagram that Fabian had, we marked some of the points where it's intersecting with the outer circle that we have of the green belt. And then we see how the green belt is kind of a little connection, at the same time also a little protection that's there to kind of filter what comes into the city of the city of Auroville. So then we have the other purple color, which has the points where the roads that are coming through the green belt are connecting the outer ring road that's there. And then, of course, is the different roads, the current roads that come and connect us to the crown. So we really thought that now that since we are looking more at the industrial zone, we picked up these few things like the loop that Fabian showed, and also was somewhere a part of the Bellinger study, where there were loops to kind of not have the heavy traffic and all come to the crown. So we really thought that kind of a loop is very important, but not just the loop. If you see these red boxes around, we also thought that some kind of spaces needs to come around it, which could accommodate for things like parking, some kind of plaza that can start having that kind of filter happening. And it's not just the loop, not just the road, but just showing that filter, but really these kind of spaces, like for example, this radial that we already have part of it built from Kotakarai coming all over to the crown and actually connecting to the admin zone eventually. If there is a little space before that which allows parking, which allows you to transition from one mode of the transport to the another, would really help us also to transition, like what also Fabian was mentioning. In 10 years we should look at how we can move from the motorized traffic to the more eco-friendly ways of that, and if we really create some spaces like that, we would be able to make that transition. So then we also had this inquiry, and we thought like it's important to see that the previous one was more like the current scenario, but as we move forward, these junction points might be a little different. They might be exactly the junction points of the radials at the crown, the junction points of the radials on the outer ring road. And also what we thought that as we move forward, we really need to look at many more connections within the city, because as we grow, we're going to be 50,000 people. We are going to have most of us working in the industrial zone, and the connections from the villages will still be there, but it won't be directly proportional to what is today. If we are 3,000 and we have 10,000 workers or 7,000 workers, that won't be the same kind of proportion that we would have. So we really need to, as we move forward, look at many more connections within the city that are there. And we thought that for now we can have our cycle paths, our footpaths remain the same, so that we keep on still investigating on these ideas of how we connect within the city.
So then when we started looking at the crown and industrial zone a little bit more into detail, we see that there are so many of these intersections, the line of forces, there are radials, and how they intersect and how these intersections will actually create spaces and important spaces. And then if we also, like we were mentioning a little bit earlier, how the seasonal shifts changes the character of the crown also. So then, and how then the adaptive activities can start taking place in this stretch. So yeah, so when we see like there is the park intersection, there are line of forces, and then there is park on the other side, and then connecting to the other zones on the sides. So when we look at the parks, it's really like crucial points where we would like to filter out, and like something like green gateways can come in, where they also become anchor points where we know that now we are transitioning, and it also filters out the heavy motorized traffics perhaps to a more filtered and more less polluting and less impact traffic which goes in the zone. And then these again, we can also play with textures of the crown itself. So these can be the poured earth concrete streets, and then yeah, and so on the Mahasaraswati Park, it can become an educational park. It can start having many more educational activities, and there is already the Kali Fitness, which we can see how to integrate that, and then how to make it more accessible as well. And on the other side, how this intersection with industrial and cultural zones, so how like the vocational training and the handicraft activities can start merging together. And so one thing that we've been brainstorming a lot about is how do we, like if we want to keep this transitioning character of the crown, how do we, with the section that was given to us, and how do we actually try to move ahead without compromising too much on the character of this filtration, of the intersections and all of that. So what we try to do is to keep this center of the crown, and there is an existing layer of the HT line infrastructure. So perhaps first identify the different kind of infrastructure which can be decentralized, so that doesn't need to come on the crown. And so DWATS is one of the, we believe, a very successful example. So we don't need to really have a sewage network around here, but we can actually start having zones take care of the sewage themselves. And we also had a quick chat with Gilles Boulico, and then he also suggested that yes, like it can be worked out quite nicely.
Modular systems, yeah.
Yeah, just to finish, perhaps to instead of having a spread out system of infrastructure, a little bit inspired from Eric's study that was given to us, to have a trench rack system which can be adapted and also in future flexible enough to repair or change. And yeah, so to have that kind of flexible system, and then to have a 3 meter around that for service road, motorized road, and then the crown itself can keep changing because it keeps changing throughout. It's our next step of exploration to see how this center comes in and out of this. Basically, it's, we've identified the sections like we were mentioning before, and then so there are the existing scenarios, and then to actually start seeing how crown can transition.
We just try to also, the next step would be to also start placing the whole idea of activities onto these sections and start seeing these transitions while we spoke about.
But it's really interesting to see the scale of line of forces that is projected, and how, in future, how do we, thank you.